Okay, this part 2, we got cut off. We're going to do a second part. We determine the new moon in 2 ways, we said. One, we could do it with the calendar, and one through witnesses. So it says Mosheach comes, we're going to re-establish the Sanhedrin, and we are going to be able to have witnesses come and testify for the new month. But we are still going to be determined according to the calendar if they are true or wrong. So why do we need the witnesses in the first place? That's the question. To determine the new moon. If we have the calendar and we know how to accurately figure these things out. To answer this, we first need to look at the purpose of witnesses. Why do we need witnesses? Witnesses either clarify the facts, verifying that what can be determined by other means, or they actually establish the facts, determining the law, what's right and what's wrong by their testimony. So witness comes, and we can figure out stuff that we wouldn't be able to figure out without the witnesses. That's the point of witnesses. In regard to sanctifying the new moon, since we can determine the facts by calculation, we only use the witnesses to verify what we already know. Here, the witnesses can establish, but only clarify. So they're not establishing, but they're clarifying the fact from science or whatever, from the calculations that we did. They're verifying it and they're figuring it out. However, this makes the witness seem irrelevant, since testimony that contradicts the astronomical calculations would be discounted. So if somebody would come and tell us a different thing than what the scientific analysis tells us, we would not listen to them, right? If so, the rabbis already know when the new moon would appear. Why bother with witnesses if you know when it's supposed to be? The Torah requires witnesses to determine the new moon, despite the advantage of calculation. We can though actually turn the question around, since it is just about every other situation. The Torah tells us to rely on witnesses to determine the facts, not just clarify them. Why use any calculation at all? Why aren't witnesses alone good enough to establish the appearance of the new moon? Since sanctifying the new moon is the first mitzvah, it has not only set the pattern for all subsequent mitzvahs, but it also teaches us the inner path to preparing for and initiating the process to redemption. Because just like the first mitzvah, just like the last mitzvah. As mentioned earlier, the Jews in Egypt were able. The importance of sanctifying the new moon, therefore, as mentioned earlier, the Jewish people in Egypt were commanded to sanctify the new moon in order to prepare for the Exodus 10 days later. So that was the first mitzvah that the Jews were saying, we're going to have the sanctity, right? In Egypt, we already got this mitzvah. The importance of sanctifying the new moon, therefore, requires it have the advantages of both calculation and witnesses. The value of calculation is that it relies on the power of the mind, the ability to think and reason. The conclusion results from our efforts and the use of our highest facility, the mind. On the other hand, we accept the testimony of witnesses solely because the Torah tells us to. So logically it makes sense to calculate, but the Torah tells us to establish the idea of witnesses. Testimony has the advantage of being a decree of the Torah. So it's not just our scientific brains figuring it out, it's also the fact that there's witnesses because the Torah tells us. As such, our acceptance of it transcends logic. It's above logic. It doesn't make sense. This is something you're doing in faith. This also expresses itself as a submission to the supreme supernal will, which is higher than our reason and understanding. Sanctifying the new moon, the Chodesh, requires both our reason and our submission to Hashem's will. So it's not enough to just believe in Hashem. And it's not enough just to understand Hashem and think about Hashem. We have to actually believe and understand. So don't think you don't have to think. You can just blindly follow God. No, you have to do both. You have to believe in Hashem, follow what Hashem says, and use your logic to understand what Hashem wants from you. Only in this way we can understand. Sanctifying the new moon, the Chodesh, requires both our reason and our submission to Hashem's will. Similarly, the innovation, the Chidush, the innovation of redemption requires both as well. Only in that way can there be a full and complete revelation of godliness. Yes, you can love every Jew and be the kindest person in the world, but you have to use your brain. You have to learn in Yom Mashiach Geula. You have to understand the laws of Geula, and that is the most important thing to do. As an aside, though, this also explains why in this passage the Torah states that Hashem spoke to both Moshe and Aaron, whereas to most cases Hashem spoke to Moshe alone. But when it came to this mitzvah, He spoke to Moshe and Aaron. Each represented one of two methods of sanctification. Moshe represented the innovation of drawing godliness down from above, self-nullification and acceptance of the heavenly yoke. Aaron represents the innovation of making the world receptive to the revelation, using our logic and our ability to reason, to make the world a dwelling place for godliness, though we ourselves bring about the redemption when our approach to a Torah and mitzvahs combines both our power of reasoning and the power of calculation, and a soft nullification and acceptance of the yoke of heaven. So Aaron represents the innovation of making the world a receptive to the revelation, using our logic and ability to understand and to reason to make the world a dwelling place for God. Through our reason, through our understanding, we can make a dwelling place for God. And Moshe, on the other hand, is Kabbalah's oil, God taking godliness upon Himself, no matter what. Though we understand bringing about the redemption when our approach to Torah and mitzvahs combines both our powers of reasoning, the power of calculation, and a soft nullification, an acceptance of the yoke of heaven beyond logic, the power of testimony. In this way, the Chodesh, the sanctifying of the new moon, and just revealed new moon, foreshadows the Chidush, the sanctity and immediate revelation and innovation of the times of Mashiach. So how do we bring Mashiach? By learning in Yom Mashiach Geula, as well as doing all the other things. Loving your fellow Jew, being a good person. Yes, those are all good things. But if you don't learn about it logically, then you're not doing what the Torah says. The Torah tells you, yes, to have witnesses. The Torah tells you, yes, but to also use your brain. L'chaim, l'chaim. All the blessings to everyone. They should have a beautiful week, a Mashiach-dike week, and a beautiful month, a beautiful Chodesh. It should be full of joy and happiness. And this Chodesh is Chodesh Shvat, when the Frierdiker Rebbe was redeemed from jail, and it's also his yurtzeit in Chodesh. On the 10th of Shvat is when he passed away, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, who went through many trials and tribulations to keep Judaism alive in Russia.
And Sarah, and nobody's gonna join this party.
Up your nose. And the day after, a year later, on Yud Aleph Nisan, that's right, Yud Aleph
Whoever.
Shvat, on Yud Aleph Shvat, the Rebbe became His Majesty King Mashiach on Yud Aleph Shvat, and followed by Tu B'Shvat, the day of the Rosh Hashanah of the trees. So this is a month full of Jewish beautiful holidays, as well as the inauguration day of the Rebbe, as well as Tu B'Shvat. L'chaim, l'chaim. Everybody have a good day and a happy day, and continue growing.